Hello and welcome back to Malachim Studio. In this series, I'm going to teach you astrology by dissecting the stories in my own life. They tell you that astrology is about personality. They tell you it explains why you're emotional or private or obsessive or intense. But that is the kindergarten version. Astrology is not just personality. Astrology is the weather report for life. Astrology is pressure mapping. It is structural weather. It shows where energy builds, where stress concentrates, where the psyche starts grinding against reality hard enough to produce events. And sometimes that pressure does not stay symbolic. Sometimes it lands in the body. Sometimes it lands in a decision. Sometimes it lands in a missed door. And sometimes it lands with your throat locked shut in a hotel bathroom in Manhattan. I do not use my face here because even though these are my stories, it's not about me. It's about the system. This is not content for sympathy. This is an autopsy of a pattern. In this series, I want to go back through the moments in my life where I hit what I call a 0 point. Those pressure nodes where something in the structure broke, exposed itself, or demanded reconfiguration. Then I want to put the chart next to the event and ask a more serious question. What was actually happening in the architecture? Not was I unlucky, was I cursed, was I overreacting? What was the design pressure in the system? What was being activated? What was no longer sustainable? And what did reality force into manifestation? Now, I want to be clear. I don't believe that we have no choice in our life. I believe in free will, but I believe most of our free will was precognitive. That we made choices when we incarnated and we picked a specific astrological picture and path. What we do within that framework is up to us in our incarnation. But certain moments, they are destiny. I'm no longer interested in motivational cliches. I'm interested in the mathematics of misfortune. On November 18th, 2018, I was living in Tampa, Florida. From the outside, I was doing what the modern world rewards. I was functional, employed, moving, producing, enduring. On paper, I looked normal enough. But underneath that surface, the system was overloaded. I was very obese at the time. I was exhausted. I was carrying chronic pressure in my body. I hated flying. I hated the compression of airports, schedules, artificial air, tight spaces, rushed movement, corporate performance, and the whole dead mechanical rhythm of it. And that matters because astrology does not just describe isolated events. It describes the state of the field an event enters. By the time I arrived in New York, I was already running too hot internally. The event did not come out of nowhere. It came out of accumulated strain meeting the wrong moment. My taxi ride from the airport to the hotel did not go well. It was not pleasant. I had never taken a taxi in New York before, and by the time I got to the hotel, I had motion sickness. I was about ready to hurl in the back seat of this guy's car. Thankfully, I didn't. But let's look at the chart. Transiting Mars had just entered Pisces, crossing into my 8th house territory. Mars is heat, force, inflammation, urgency, aggression, sharpness, and muscular contraction. In Pisces, Mars does not operate cleanly. It diffuses, it floods, it creates steam. It bypasses straight lines and moves through the body like stress in liquid form. It can create confusion, overwhelm, internal reactivity, invisible pressure, and actions that do not feel fully under conscious command. And for me, Pisces is not abstract territory. My sun is in Pisces in the 8th house. My Jupiter is in Pisces in the 8th house. So when Mars crossed that threshold, it was entering a part of my chart already wired to themes of crisis, vulnerability, survival, loss of control, and hidden processes, and deep internal states. It was not yet exactly on my sun, but it had entered the chamber. The temperature was rising. The mechanism had been engaged. And the 8th house is important here. People reduce the 8th house to sex, death, and other people's money because that sounds dramatic and marketable. But the deeper truth is that the 8th house deals with threshold experiences, states where control breaks down, where the ego cannot simply manage what is happening, where you meet forces inside life that do not ask permission. It governs crisis, it governs internal pressure, it governs involuntary process. It governs the places where survival gets personal. So the first morning in Manhattan, I was rushed. I was off rhythm. I had had pizza the night before, and so I grabbed a slice of cold pizza from the fridge because it was there, and modern life trains you to eat like shit. So I took a swig of cold water to wash it down, and that's when it happened. I swallowed, and the world stopped. My stomach and my esophagus spasmed. My throat locked up. My body seized. I was in a hotel bathroom, head tilted back, staring at the ceiling with a geyser of water shooting up and down in my throat. I was caught in a violent convulsion between swallowing and not swallowing, breathing and not breathing, control and total loss of control. I didn't know whether to try to call 911 or if I was going to fall over dead on the bathroom floor. That is the part people do not understand about crisis. It is not poetic while it is happening. It is crude. It is physical. It is humiliating. My stomach made sounds I didn't know I could make. It is immediate. There was no mysticism in that moment. There was just the body saying, no more, no further. And this is where astrology gets real for me. Because Mars in the 8th is not just assertive information or assertive transformation or some soft, useless phrase. Sometimes Mars in the 8th is a psychological revolt. Sometimes it is the body weaponizing contraction. Sometimes it is your organism refusing another ounce of pressure. And because this was Pisces, the refusal came through chaos, floods, spasm, confusion, vulnerability, and a dissolving of functional control. Not a dramatic external fight, an internal one. My body was not cooperating with my plans. It was issuing a verdict. And Mars was not acting alone. Neptune was also in Pisces, moving through that same general region of my chart. That matters because Neptune dissolves boundaries, blurs signals, weakens certainty, and can create states where the body, mind, and environment stop behaving in crisp, separable ways. Under Neptune pressure, things get slippery. Hard edges soften. Control becomes less reliable. The body can become more sensitive, more porous, more overwhelmed. So this was not just a Mars event. It was a Mars event in Neptunian territory. Acute force inside a dissolving field. Stress inside permeability. Fight response inside loss of definition. That combination can feel like trying to hold shape while the structure is melting. Then there is the North Node at 29 degrees Cancer. That degree matters. 29 is a threshold degree, a culminating degree, a pressure degree. Things at 29 often do not whisper. They press for decision, exposure, change, or consequence. And in Cancer, the node points towards security, nourishment, protection, emotional truth, and the actual condition of the inner life. Not the performance, the condition. Set that against the way I was living, stress-loaded, overfunctioning, disconnected from what my body was actually carrying, forcing movement because the machine required movement. That node placement reads like a demand. Is the life you are building actually able to hold you? Is your structure protective or is it just productive? Are you nourished or merely functioning? That morning in the bathroom was not just a random scare. It was a threshold moment. The system hit the point where something hidden became undeniable. You can fake your way through fatigue. You can fake your way through resentment. You can fake your way through low-grade misery. But when the throat locks and the body has moved the conversation out of abstraction, and the day did not stop there. I cleaned off my shirt. I straightened my corporate mask. I got in the taxi. And then, as I was exiting the cab, I left my phone in the cab. That sounds minor compared to almost choking to death, but astrologically it fits the pattern. Mercury was retrograde in Sagittarius, the sign of travel, movement, transit, distance, and navigation. Mercury retrograde is not magic punishment, it is signal distortion, crossed wires, lost objects, errors in handoff, temporary disconnection from tools, routes, or communications. And Sagittarius, especially around travel, the symbolism is almost embarrassingly literal. So after the bodily crisis came the communication disruption. After survival came dislocation. After the spasm came the lost tether. And that is how these days often work. Not as one giant cinematic event, but as a cluster of failures along the same symbolic fault line. The body says no, the schedule destabilizes, the object disappears, the illusion of control thins out. Thanks to a very kind coworker who lives in New York and knew how to get a hold of the cab company, I did get my phone back. But that is not the point. The point is that the day kept repeating the same message in different language. You are not as in command of this structure as you think you are. That was the message. So now we look at Jupiter and Sagittarius. Normally, people want Jupiter to mean blessings, expansion, luck, the wind, the open road, the benevolent hand of fate. And yes, Jupiter can absolutely correspond with those things. But Jupiter does not always arrive as an easy gift, because Jupiter expands whatever it touches. And that doesn't always mean good things. Sometimes it shows you the abundance field that exists around you while simultaneously revealing that you do not currently have the capacity to receive it. And that part is brutal. Because, folks, the story gets worse. After I made it back to Tampa, I was depleted, totally drained. I usually stopped at the 7-Eleven near my house to buy scratch-off lottery tickets. Not as some grand financial strategy, just a small irrational flicker of hope. I still do this. A tiny ritual possibility and a life that often felt mechanically overdetermined. But that night I was too exhausted. I just went home. The next day, I found out that at my exact 7-Eleven, around the time that I would have been there, someone bought $1 million winning scratch-off ticket. That is the part people love to reduce to fate porn. You almost won. You missed your blessing. It wasn't meant for you. But that is too shallow. What matters is not the mythology of the ticket. What matters is the architecture of capacity. Because this chart shows a real tension between pressure and expansion, between the survival load and the abundance field, between Mars and Jupiter, between bodily strain and missed opportunity. This is one of the hardest truths I know. Luck requires capacity. If your nervous system is overloaded, if your body is inflamed, if your mind is scattered, if your life structure is built on chronic compression, then even when the opening appears, you may be too depleted to walk through it. People talk about manifestation like it is just desire plus belief. That's bullshit. Receiving also depends on regulation, on timing, on available bandwidth, on whether your system is busy surviving an internal emergency when the external opening appears. In November of 2018, I was giving maximum effort. I was doing what people call responsible. I was pushing, showing up, enduring, functioning. And I still ended up almost choking to death in a hotel bathroom, alone, and missing $1 million window by sheer depletion. So no, effort alone is not the whole equation. And no, hustle is not the highest law. Sometimes the grind keeps you alive in one moment while making you unavailable to life in the next. That is the real tragedy of over-adaptation. The good soldier mode can save your job, save your face, save the schedule, and save appearances, and maybe save your life. But it can also lock you so deeply into survival that you become structurally unable to receive anything beyond survival. I survived that bathroom. I cleaned myself up. I walked into the office. I straightened my corporate mask, and I said nothing. I performed professionalism. But that performance was not strength, not entirely. Part of it was fragmentation. Part of it was conditioning. Part of it was the learned reflex to keep the machine moving no matter what the body just went through. And that is why I call this the choke point, quite literally. Because the choke point was not only physical, it was economic, psychological, spiritual, and structural. My throat locked, my day destabilized, my tether vanished. My exhaustion cost me presence at the edge of possibility. This is not one event. This is a pattern diagram. The point is not that I should have won the $1 million. The point is that by then, my life had become a system that could no longer carry its own pressure cleanly. And once that happens, fate does not need to punish you. Your own structure starts doing the job. That is what I want this series to expose. Not superstition, not victimhood, not simplistic inspiration. Architecture, where the pressure builds, where the leak begins, where the body tells the truth first, where the chart shows the fault line before the event makes it undeniable. If you want to change your life, you cannot just ask what you want. You have to ask where you are constricted, where you are overdriven, where you are swallowing things you cannot actually digest, where your performance of stability is costing you real capacity. Because if your system is full of stress, you do not experience Jupiter as a blessing. You experience it as the thing you were too exhausted to reach. One other thing that I will also mention is that New York happens to be right on my Jupiter ascendant line. Normally, most people would say, that's fantastic, you should feel great there. Except Jupiter expands whatever it touches. For me, New York felt like the worst possible place to be. Overcrowded, noisy, lights everywhere. I rarely got any sleep at all. I would never want to live in New York. And that is the cruel elegance of the whole thing. The goal may be nearby, the opening may be real, the window may exist, but if Mars has your body in a vice, if Neptune has blurred your center, if Mercury has scattered your grip, and if the node is demanding a correction you refuse to make, then the opportunity can pass within feet of you and still not become yours. That is not failure in the childish sense. That is misalignment made concrete. Next time, I want to go back to another 0 point in my life, what I like to call the slums era, the deeper collapse, the earlier architecture. But for now, the question is simple. Where in your life are you forcing yourself to digest what your system has already rejected? Where are you staying functional inside a structure that is quietly strangling you? And how much of your so-called bad luck is really just a life built with no room left to receive anything good? Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.